Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Student Success Workshop Series through Cal. Whether you're a Cal major or you've taken a Cal class before, y'all are welcome. Happy you're here today. My name is Zach McDeal. I'm a Student Success Advisor for the College of Arts and Letters, and we are here to talk about procrastination and motivation. I figured post-spring break, this would be a good topic to have. This was before all the coronavirus stuff happened, and now a lot of your learning situations look a lot different than we had planned at the beginning of the semester. And so I think this topic is still really, really relevant to what's going on. There we go. Okay, so before we begin, anyone that didn't catch it, sorry I keep repeating myself. If you can go to the tiny URL in the chat at the top and sign in. Normally we'd have you do that in person, but since we're adapting, this is what we're gonna do. Please keep your mics muted and feel free to leave your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll take a couple times during the workshop to stop and answer anybody's questions that they may have. And please remember that this is just going to be informative. So I'm an advisor, but I'm not a trained counselor or a psychiatrist. And so, there are people at SDSU that can help if there are more, serious or personal questions. And so counseling and psych services is still operating. They're doing remote appointments. And so if that's something you want to take advantage of, definitely check out their website and see what they have to offer. Also, if there are more serious things going on in your life right now, and that this kind of pandemic has kind of sent you for a loop, and you're trying to manage your education with all these other things going on. We have the Economic Crisis Response Team available for other resources. So if you just look up SDSU ECRT, they have a form you can fill out, and so one will get in touch with you hopefully in the future. All right, let's get going. So today we're going to talk about what is procrastination, and then we're going to look at some of the causes of procrastination, look at, what is your procrastination mindset and do some reflection, and then we're going to move into the motivation and how we overcome procrastination and deal with those challenges. And so one of the main resources I got a lot of information from is this wonderful book called Procrastination, Why You Do It, and what to do about it now. And so it seems fascinating, and if you definitely pick that up if you want to do more future reading, you probably see a lot of similar information to what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, so it's important to cite your sources. So here we go. Okay, so what exactly is procrastination? And at first I was like, well, yeah, that's obvious. It's, when you're supposed to do something, you don't do it. But when thinking about all the different reasons for why people procrastinate, people might actually have different definitions of what that means to them. And so, even looking at different dictionaries, for some, it's you're putting off something due to carelessness or laziness, or maybe you're just putting off something because it should be done. And so the fact that you're just delaying something that's supposed to happen is automatic procrastination. If you're looking at it from a psychological perspective, it can be involved with a negative emotion. So you're putting off something and you feel negative about it. That's procrastination. And so maybe it's not considered procrastination to you if you don't feel bad about doing it. Or maybe it's you're putting off something that was intended. So if there's something that you're delaying that wasn't intended, maybe that's not procrastination. So I'm not here to tell you what exactly the right or wrong definition is, because I think it can be a very personal thing based on your own experiences with procrastination. But I wanted to show that we may all be operating with kind of a different mindset on what it means to procrastinate and why we do it. And so that's okay. Yeah, you can operate with within those different definitions, and yeah, that's okay. So one of the common reasons for procrastination is fear, and it doesn't have to be this big scary thing, but it could be more of an innate fear. And this book kind of categorizes it in 5 big umbrella categories for fear. So the first is fear of failure, and talks about how procrastinators are often perfectionists. And you might not think that because you think, oh, perfectionists are people that get things done and they like to check off their boxes and they want to do everything right so they wouldn't procrastinate. Well, yes, that's one type of perfectionism, but the other type is, you have this goal of, I want to be perfect. And so it's that fear of not being perfect that inhibits you from acting, from doing something that leads to procrastination. And so these kind of procrastinators can be very self-critical. And again, um, this is not me diagnosing anybody. This is just kind of putting this information, this research out there. You may find with fear of failure procrastinators that they avoid competition, because someone has to lose in a competition, and so they just avoid that, altogether. Um, and one thing I liked was this comparison to Dweck's fixed and growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, it kind of refers to intelligence. It's that you have all the intelligence you are ever meant to have. And so every time you perform, every time you do something, you're demonstrating that intelligence. Whereas a growth mindset more focuses on you have the ability to grow and change and learn new things and grow your intelligence. And so, one of the things you may have to ask yourself is success about learning or proving how smart you are? So it's just kind of an interesting question to think about, reflect on, if that may be the type of procrastination you deal with. I'm kind of doing a 180, a flip side. There's the fear of success. So it's a fear that if you succeed in something, if you do something really well, it's only going to get harder from there. If you learn a piece of music, you're only going to be asked to learn harder pieces of music. If you do really well in a track and field race, you're only going to be asked to run it faster the next time. And so it's that fear of constantly raising the bar that leads to procrastination and even trying. There's also this worry that being successful will cause people to judge you because they may see your confidence in success as arrogance, or there's a fear that you might hurt people with your success, that if you win, someone has to lose. And so in order to avoid that, you procrastinate being successful. All right, so the third kind of umbrella idea about procrastination is this fear of losing control, that procrastination is a tool people can use to retain control over their lives, that when other people are telling them what to do or how to do something, that you can procrastinate as a way of saying no, of rebelling against that, against the order, against structure, against the man. So one of the things you might see as a student is, you have a deadline, professor saying, oh, this is due in 3 weeks. And you say, well, I'm going to do it in 3.5 because I'm going to set my own deadline because I'm my own person. And if that's your thing, that could be a reason that you procrastinate. The next two, I think, are kind of intertwined and they're two sides of the same coin. There's a fear of separation, where you could procrastinate doing something big, making a big change in your life, leaving a comfort because you don't know what it's like to live or experience life without that comfort, without the connection of family, of friends, of a hometown. For some of you, that may be choosing where to go to college or grad school, that you don't want to necessarily leave your family or the comfort of what you know. And there's definitely a cultural element to separation, because if you're asking yourself to go to some place that doesn't recognize or doesn't understand your cultural background, or where you might lose that connection to it, there's definitely a level of unsurety there. And so this can definitely be a big factor in procrastinating decisions that causes someone to experience a cultural shift. And on the flip side of that, there's a fear of intimacy. So it's not a fear of losing something, it's a fear of gaining. And what does gaining someone or something in your life and opening yourself up to that, what does that mean? And there's a fear that if I make this change, I don't know how that's going to change me or my life. And so some people will put off, procrastinate relationships or other important friendships or different types of relationships. Yeah. So outside of those 5 big ones, there's quite a few other reasons that people can choose to procrastinate. Some people have a poor sense of time management. There's a lot of research that procrastinators, quite a few of them, just have a bad sense of time. And they don't really understand how long it takes for them to get things done. And they procrastinate getting better at it. And so that could be a reason people procrastinate, is just because they don't really understand how long it takes to get things done. They can also do with a lack of priority, where they don't understand how to organize things, when to put the important things first. And so you put off doing something that's maybe more important for something that you like better. And there's external factors like concentration or distractions. I mean, that can also be an internal thing, but then I'm sure for a lot of you, your learning situation has changed. And so you're dealing with all sorts of new distractions in where you learn and how you learn. And so those could be other factors for putting something off, just because not only is it distracting, but there could be other things in your life that are distracting you and causing you to shift where you're putting your priorities, and then you may be putting off your schoolwork. And then there's all sorts of personal problems. And I don't want to dive in too much into what are, either your physical health or your mental health. And there's a lot of other factors, that could be at work that could be reasons for procrastinating. And so there's this thing called the procrastinator's code, which is essentially a very common framework that procrastinators will use as justification for why they procrastinate. And so as you look through these, you might see quite a few things that you may have said to yourself, either very consciously or subliminally, or and use these as reasons for why you might procrastinate something. And so kind of on the flip side of that is, one of the ways you start tackling procrastination is you take these procrastinator mindsets and where are we going? There we go. You flip them. So then instead of thinking that you have to be perfect all the time, you recognize that it's not possible to be perfect, or that you shouldn't have any limitations. Well, everyone has limitations. If you succeed, someone will get hurt. And then it's important to remember that you're entitled to succeed. And you can, even with that, then you can deal with other people's reactions. But your success should be separate from how other people react. And so, whether or not you fully embrace all of these alternative viewpoints, it's important to see that for every reason that you might say, I'm going to procrastinate because, there's a kind of a flip side to that. Well, the reason you shouldn't procrastinate is this. All right. So right now, I want to do an activity with y'all. So I don't know if any of you, if you're on your computers, or if you have a piece of paper around, I want you to do kind of a self-assessment. Now, this is not meant to be completely accurate. This is more just to start you reflecting on yourself and your own experiences. So, for those of you that do procrastinate, and if you don't, that's wonderful. I haven't encountered anybody in my life that's never procrastinated on anything. And so one of the things you can do is just, answer some of these questions. We'll take a couple seconds to do that. Write them down, and kind of see what you think. What comes to your mind when you ask yourself, when I want to procrastinate, is that an I feel, I do, I think, I hope? It's very open-ended, because again, procrastination is a very personal thing. And the reasons can be very personal, and so it's not going to be the same for everybody. And then, asking yourself, if I didn't procrastinate, what would that be like? If you didn't struggle with procrastination, how would your life be different? I don't know if you've ever thought about that. Even from the little minute details that would change to maybe life altering decisions. And then if you didn't procrastinate, what new situations would you have to face? A lot of times we procrastinate for very specific reasons to avoid certain things. So if we didn't procrastinate, what would we have to face instead? And so, again, this is going to be recorded, so you can always go back if you want to do this activity in more depth. So let's talk about staying motivated. And we've kind of been starting reflecting on why we procrastinate, and now we kind of need to think about, okay, so how am I going to stay motivated to do these things that I don't want to procrastinate anymore? So let's start with setting goals, because that's a kind of a big thing, that if you want to be able to do something, you should set yourself a SMART goal. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the SMART goal terminology before, but for those that haven't, it's just an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. It means your goals should be very, very specific. That, again, it should be something you want to do and you can do. So, and then the measurable piece means that it should be something that you can achieve. So you can measure and determine when it's done. Sometimes we set vague goals for ourselves, and it's really hard to determine when we've actually achieved them. And nothing can be more demotivating than never actually being able to achieve your goals. So setting something that's very measurable, like a specific number, a time, a date, just something where you have physical evidence that it's been completed. Something that's attainable. So, while it could be something that's measurable, if it's not going to be actually attainable, if it's not something that you're going to be able to do in this lifetime, maybe it's not the best goal, or if it's not something that's going to be able to do anytime soon. Something that's relevant. If you're going to achieve your goals, it should be something you want to do that's related to you. It's going to be awful hard to be an astronaut if you've never taken a science class before, or you've shown no interest in space before. So make sure it's something relevant to you. And have it be time bound. Give yourself an end date for your goal. It's awful easy to set a goal for yourself, and have it just be whenever that you're supposed to get it done. That's a form of procrastination. Set yourself a deadline so that you know that you have to get something done, something measurable done by a certain deadline. So with that, I encourage you to set goals that are not too big. Start small. In your classes every day, set yourself a purpose. Every study session you have, give yourself a goal for what you're going to achieve in that study session, so that you know why you're doing what you're doing. You can give yourself a reason why you are spending the time you are doing what you're doing. And then kind of on the right there, action generates motivation. So it's really easy to get going once you've made that first step, but it's really hard to do if the first step of your goal is like the hardest part of the goal. So, make a goal where the first step can be achieved in 5 minutes or less. So that may mean you have to shrink your goal, and then you can go and make bigger and bigger goals that are all related. But if you're going to set a real SMART goal for yourself, do something where that in the next 5 minutes, I can at least take the first step, whether that's looking at a website, whether that's, putting on your shoes. Do something where you can take that first step, so that makes it easier and easier to take consecutive steps. And then only set goals you can commit to completing. Again, you don't want to set a goal that you don't think you're going to be able to achieve, because then it's only more demotivating, more discouraging when you don't complete the goal. You may not necessarily meet your goal the way you initially set it. You may not do it in the right time, but pick a goal you can commit to, you want to work towards it. So that's kind of important. So, and then I wanted to share, some digital resources with you all. So there is an app called Habitable that, if you want to look that up, that's an app where you can essentially track your habits on a daily, kind of like a daily or a weekly basis. And so if you want to set goals, and you can kind of use an app to track your progress towards your goals. So that's one way to do that. I mean, some people like doing it with pieces of paper. You could use physical objects to track your progress. But just know there are resources out there to help you achieve your goals. All right. So next, managing your time. I'm sure all of y'all have heard that in order to be a successful student, you need to be able to manage your time. But that looks very different for everybody. And I'm sure people have tried physical schedules, apps, calendars, alarms, all sorts of things to manage your time. And hopefully you found something that works for you, but maybe not yet. And so one of the cool things I found is called an unschedule. And so with a traditional schedule, you basically fill up your calendar every hour with what you need to do when you need to do it. So the idea of an unscheduled schedule is to create a grid of all the hours in a week, and then maybe assign just the essentials. So what is essentially like eating, sleeping, hygiene, and going to class. So if you have those things in there, then leave the rest blank. You can kind of make a list of the things you want to do, like studying, practicing an instrument, working out, and then just log in there what you do when you do it. So don't set yourself preset times like I'm going to do 7 hours at the gym this week. Just track how often you go to the gym, and then at the end of the week, reward yourself for how much you did. And then you can kind of go from there and see, okay, this week I did this much. Next week I want to try to do that or even more. So it's not about punishing yourself for not doing as much as you initially said you were going to do. It's rewarding yourself for the work you do. And that's so important when it comes to motivation, is making sure you reward yourself for the things you do achieve and not always focusing on the negative things you don't. Another way to help with your time and perhaps studying is to break down bigger things into much smaller chunks. And so, if that's, you need to study for a big test, then breaking it down instead of like 1 6-hour study session, break it down into like 6 1-hour study sessions. And then there's this cool thing called the Pomodoro method, which is you can look up. It's not 100% sure where the tomato comes in, but the idea of the Pomodoro method is that you basically have like 25-minute study sessions, and you study for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. Study for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. And then every 2 or 4 study sessions, you give yourself a bigger break. And so that's kind of how you chunk your time when you study, is by doing, just doing it in smaller chunks. So there's this app called Clockwork Tomato that you can download that will help you set those, you can kind of set the timer for those short, 25-minute study sessions and your breaks, and then help you all build it in so you don't have to keep track of it yourself. The app will do it for you. There's all sorts of other ways you can do Pomodoro method and all sorts of other apps. That's just one I thought would be a cool resource for you to use. All right, accountability. And so sometimes it's very easy to set goals for ourselves, but if we don't have anybody holding accountable and we're really bad at holding ourselves accountable, sometimes it might be easier if we loop other people into it. And so this is an example that you can totally use of an accountability contract, where you are basically bringing other people into it. Now you can do this physical kind. You could do a just a verbal agreement, but sometimes when you put it in writing, it makes it a little more real. It's harder to go back because you have physical proof that it actually exists. So you're basically agreeing to do something, and you're setting it, you're setting yourself a time, you're being specific, you're creating a SMART goal for yourself. And then I think the cool part about this one is that you're promising how you're going to reward yourself. So you're making sure that, again, you're recognizing the work you've done and rewarding that. And then you get a witness assigned. So it could be, sibling, roommate, parents, little sibling, someone who's going to hold you accountable to make sure that you did it. And so whatever form you can use this, I think it's kind of a really cool tool. And at first it seems like a little, oh, I don't want to burden other people with my problems. But, there's a lot of people out there that want to see you succeed and are more than happy to help hold you accountable if you just ask. All right, create the right learning environment. And I feel this is, ever as important right now, especially when y'all's learning situations have totally been tossed up in the air, and you're trying to make it work with something maybe you weren't expecting to. And so when thinking about creating the right learning environment, make sure you're setting boundaries with yourself and the people you're living with. So that can be a physical boundary where you say, okay, this is going to be the space, I'm trapped at home right now because we can't go outside. It's not like you can go to a coffee shop or the library. So this is going to be the space where I do my schoolwork. And the couch over there, my bed, those are places where I sleep or I hang out. But this desk or this kitchen table, this is where I'm going to study. By having that separation, it's much easier to focus and stay motivated on your schoolwork when you're not also thinking like, oh, I wish I could be playing video games or reading a book right now. Sometimes those boundaries can be more of a time-based thing where you say, what, this is the time of the day where I'm in school mode. I may be at home, I may be hanging out right next to my little siblings or my parents, but even though I'm physically here, I'm on school time right now. And so this is what I need to do from this time to this time. After that, I can do other things that can help out. But right now, this is my school time. You may have to be flexible with that because I know life is crazy right now, but the more you can set yourself some boundaries, the better you're going to be able to keep going with your schoolwork the rest of the semester. Make sure you stay engaged in your communities. And so a lot of that is looking like this. It's looking like Zoom or other, digital camera sharing software. So make sure you're staying connected with your peers, with your friends. Make sure that when you're in your classes online, you're staying engaged. When you're just being passive in your classes, it's really hard to stay motivated because the more passive you are, the less engaged you are with the material, the more disinteresting it is, and the easier it is to procrastinate and not do it. The more you put yourself into it, the more you find things that are interesting to you, the more you find ways to apply what you're learning to real life examples, the more questions you can ask in your virtual spaces, the more likely you are to be successful. And so let's just go on walks. We can't necessarily go anywhere specifically, but make sure you're getting outside or you're working out, and make sure you're taking time for your health, because that's just as important for your learning and your brain's health as mental health, which we'll talk about in a second. So make sure you're doing something to move. Incorporate that into your breaks. If you're doing the Pomodoro method on those 5-minute breaks, make sure you're getting up and walking around. And on your longer breaks, I don't know, do jumping jacks or burpees. I don't love burpees, but sometimes you do what you got to do when you're stuck at home. And then try to reduce your distractions. So, we can't always reduce all the distractions like, family if they're right there with us, but there are things we can do. Some of the apps I included here, Forest is a cool app and someone shared with me where essentially you turn it on at the start of a class and you can start growing a forest. So every time you turn it on, you start growing a tree, and you have to keep the app open in order for it to grow. And if you close out of that app, you switch to something else, the tree dies and you can't grow the forest. It's a little morbid, but that idea of you can't use your phone as a distraction because you're doing something, it's doing something, is a great way if you feel like different social media apps are a distraction for you right now. And then cold turkey is kind of similarly, is a kind of a browser extension where you can block certain websites. So if you feel like, I don't know, if you're checking Twitter on your computer, or you're going to BuzzFeed, or you're going to CNN, or you're going to wherever you go on the internet as a website to procrastinate doing your work, block it. Make sure you can't use it at certain times. And so, it's a little dramatic, but it can work if that's something that you just need to have that distraction removed from you. All right, and so we talked kind of about physical health. and your physical environment. So let's talk about your mental health. So make sure that you're doing that you're taking care of your mental health. So whether that's going to be meditating or doing yoga or listening to music, there's all sorts of resources available. There's apps like Calm that do guided meditations. YouTube has millions of videos, and so there's plenty of content on there to access not only free workouts but free meditations, free yoga sessions, that kind of stuff. Um, Especially nowadays, make sure you're limiting your news intake and maybe your social media. It's especially with the reduced social contact, it can be really easy to seek out um, other other voices, but it's not always going to be the most healthy for you, and it can uh, remind you of a lot of the negativity that's going on in the world. And so, in small doses, that's great, but if you do too much of that, it can really be detrimental to kind of your outlook on things and be demotivating. So please make sure that you only consume as much as you think is going to be healthy for you. I encourage you to create a routine to develop a sense of normalcy. What we're experiencing right now is not necessarily normal. And so I think I can say that with some certainty. And so I encourage you to look at creating some kind of a daily routine for yourself so that you can create some normalcy in the abnormalcy, if that makes sense. Practice mindfulness, which means actively thinking about what you're doing. And so, if you feel like you are procrastinating or wanting to procrastinate, take a second, do and meditate, or just think about, take a step back and think, what am I doing? Am I going to be procrastinating this right now? Why am I doing that? So it's just taking that second to slow down and really think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And it might be easier to act on that or do something that's, less procrastination or motivation that way. And then just focus on the positivity. It can be, again, really demotivating to focus on all the negative stuff in the world. So when you're thinking about your goals and what you want to do and how far you come, make sure you just stay positive. All right. So that's going to end it for the content I have right now. I am going to, this is my email, zmcdaniel@scsu.edu. So you can email me if you ever have any more questions. We're all working from home, but your advisors are all available for remote conferencing or questions. And so make sure you're connecting with those resources on campus, even remotely, because we haven't gone anywhere. We're still here to serve you. And so it looks like we've gotten the tiny URL shared. Awesome. Okay, so we have a question about other types of breaks do you recommend? And I think that depends on what you've been doing. So it could be, if you've been sitting down a long time, it could be a fitness break. If you feel tired, I would encourage you to take a nap. If you're hungry, take a food break. If you just need to switch between subjects, switch between subjects. Give yourself a break from one thing and study something else. So I would say just be honest about, if you're thinking about, I don't want to do this anymore and I might procrastinate even more, think about, well, what do I want to do? Or if I need to do something, how could I motivate myself to do that? And then use that break to give yourself that time to transition between things. A lot of the times we try to push ourselves to study beyond what we're capable of focusing on. So, you'll spend an hour studying, but only 10 minutes of that will be really focused, and the rest of it will just be kind of wasted because you're not focused. So, if you feel like you can focus for 10 minutes right now, study for 10 minutes, take a quick break, collect yourself, and then think about, okay, well, what can I study? What can I focus on for the next 10 minutes? And then maybe try to increase it going forward. Now I'm going to try to focus for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So use your breaks not only to answer your physical or mental needs, but also as a time to reset yourself and prepare yourself for the next goal or task that you want to complete. And otherwise, I want to thank you all so much um, for joining me today. This was our first time doing one of these kind of virtual um, Zoom workshops, and I enjoyed it. It's different not getting to see you all in person, but we're trying to make the best of the situation and hope to bring you more content in the future. We're planning on doing a finals prep workshop in later this month, in the couple weeks before leading up to finals. And so keep your eyes and ears out for information about that so that you don't miss out on that. Again, we'll be recording it as well, but when you get to attend live, it's a great opportunity not only to have your questions uh, answered by me, but it's a great time for you all to share information with each other in the chat, sharing resources that you as a student have come to found really useful. And so once again, thank you all. Please be sure that you signed into the tiny URL and that you let us know that you were here so that we can follow up with you, and make sure that you get the link to the recording once we've got it finalized so that you have access to that going forward. Thank you all for being here today.